Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Hustling Sideways. I'm Alan Halas. I'm a music writer from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And I am Jim Love, and I'm a keynote and motivational speaker from Chicago, Illinois, living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I always just got to throw that in there just to put a crutch in our intro. Yeah, we're here.
We're here. It is episode 59 of the Hustling Sideways podcast. Jim and I just saw each other literally yesterday for episode 58, which came out 2 weeks ago. I also literally just finished a run. Like I got done, I ran 3 miles, and like
nice.
I knew that we were doing this virtual today, so I'm like, oh, I can be sweaty.
That's right. It's a humble flex, but yeah, fair enough. So shout out to Alan. I
never said I ran them fast.
Well, good point. Good point. So this is obviously virtual today, and a little behind the scenes. It took me like 20 minutes to log in this meeting. So we're here now. We're good to go. We're excited. And what's funny is I equate that to me having been late to like having to use directions for Alan's house the first 25 times that we recorded because I couldn't figure out where to go. So that's kind of the virtual equivalent of me having to do directions. And that was an analogy I just came up with my head in now. So, we're
sent
good.
on a virtual map quest. And that's the whole reference. But,
if you've hit the tracks, you've gone too far. Yes, exactly.
You were asking somebody outside, one of your neighbors, like if I make a turn here, do I get to the Zoom link to,
It won't great.
Anyway.
Yes. Well, we have an amazing guest today. As you all know, this was actually supposed to happen a couple months ago, but it's now going to be happening next semester. Is Alan and I are going to be doing some live episodes from the 707 Hub in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at a place called Marquette University, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with that place, but we're very excited.
Listen to this have definitely heard of Marquette.
Correct. Yes. So we one good thing about being connected to the 707 Hub is that we end up being connected to really, really cool people who have a boatload of side hustles, who are the perfect people to interview. And we have one of those people with us today. So we are pumped up. On that note, I'm just going to introduce him. So we have Kyle Hagge, who is the director of community, which I love, at the Morning Brew, and with a slew of other high side hustles that we'll get into. So Kyle, welcome to Hustling Sideways. This is your applause track.
Welcome. I love it. The live applause track. Alan, Jim. Alan, I'm glad you got a run in. Jim, I'm glad that you've found and learned Zoom. It's only been 3 years, but you got it down now. That's good.
Let's be clear. This was Alan's fault. I want to be clear about that. There were broken links.
Wow. and this might be the podcast that ruins the relationship.
That's right. We're done. I guess that's it.
This is the one. You know what? Stay at that house.
You stay here. Don't go. Don't go. I understand. That's
angrily
great.
Log off.
Leave meeting.
Okay, real quick as a sidebar. Mm-hmm. You can't angrily hang up a phone anymore. And you don't just like hit a phone and just be like, yeah, it doesn't do the same thing. Is there a way I've never been in a Zoom meeting where somebody is like angrily signed off, but if that happens, like
you can like
the effect of slamming a phone now.
Yeah, I guess you could like slam your computer shut. Like if I were to take my computer and slam it shut, that'd probably be the equivalent, which I could do if I get really upset. I would totally do that.
That's the only one.
That's it.
We won't be doing that today because we've got Kyle here, and he's got a great story as well. And had a little bit of time at Marquette, just like us. But before we get into Marquette, let's learn a little bit kind of about your background and what really got you interested in doing the stuff that you're starting to pursue. Tell us a little bit how you grew up, where you grew up, and what we were all involved in.
Yeah, so I grew up in the great city of Eden Prairie, Minnesota, a little burb outside of Minneapolis. I went to the University of Minnesota and graduated in 2015, degree in political science and philosophy. So I was extremely unemployable, which is always fun. And then I actually did AmeriCorps for 2 years. So that brought me to Milwaukee. I did 2 years of AmeriCorps for an organization in the city called College Possible. They're focused on helping first-gen low-income students get to and through college. So I was a teacher for 2 years at Milwaukee High School of the Arts. And then after that, I got into Marquette as a Trinity Fellow, which is a fellowship for social and economic justice, and got my master's in political science. And while I was at Marquette, my actual job through the Trinity Fellowship was the housing authority for the city of Milwaukee. So I was working there as well. And then that is kind of where I started doing a lot of different side husles, so to speak.
Sure.
Now, did you ever think you'd be a teacher? Because that's like, I mean, obviously AmeriCorps is awesome. Did you, like, what was that like to walk into a classroom and lesson plan, like to do all?
Yeah. It's a great question. I didn't grow up wanting to be a teacher, although my mom was. So shout out to Dory Hagge. She was an elementary school teacher, and so it definitely wasn't about that for me. It was really about impact, and I grew up in what I would say is just a pretty privileged position, and I felt like what you do with privilege is try to make the world a little better. And so at the time, and I still do believe this, but at the time I was really drawn to service, and so that's what made me want to do AmeriCorps. And so I was kind of like, I felt like I was like an AmeriCorps free agent. I was like, whoever signs me, I'm going to do it. And so I ended up, getting drafted, so to speak, for College Possible, and then went to Milwaukee, and lesson planning became a skill of mine, I suppose.
That's great. It's a lot to learn. I can't imagine doing it. So kudos to you. And I'm just going to imagine how much you learn in that process of the
and
whole
look,
experience.
I never thought I'd be excited about the Pythagorean theorem, but I really, it really got me going.
I still feel like I don't know it, and we
No
don't
idea.
have to, you don't have to.
I got my lesson plan right in the back. I could pull something up here.
That'll be a bonus episode one week, as we'll learn the Pythagorean theorem again. But that initial experience of teaching and having kids and being, kids that look up to you now and kind of mentoring them. What's kind of the challenge that faces you, like from, the jump? I'm sure that's a little intimidating when you now have to kind of engage with these kids and make sure that they're like actually interested in what you're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What was that kind of initial process like for you, and how did you kind of figure that out?
Yeah, it's a very thoughtful question. I would say that I was also teaching after school. So I was in the school during the day, and then for 2 hours after school, I'd have to teach. So it's like you're playing on hard mode at that point. Like kids don't even have to be there. They just sat through like 8 hours of school, and you're just armed with some flaming hot Cheetos and a dream to get them to come to the session. But I do think there's actually a lot of lessons. I think that, it's like, if you have to motivate someone, you're rarely going to do it like contractually. Like if you have to go to like, well, you signed this paper that said you were going to show up, so you should, that typically fails. But if you can get them to commit or like believe in a vision and that they're kind of opting into the experience, that always going to lead to the best results. So I think probably the first month I really just focused on building relationships. I think, you're not going to trust someone that you don't have a relationship with. And I think it's particularly important to develop those relationships. So focusing on the relationships, making the kids understand that like I did actually care about them, and I wanted to help them achieve what they wanted to achieve and not what I thought they should achieve. So I think that was also important. And then the last thing that's probably the biggest lesson from that time is just authenticity. I mean, the school was, I would say 90% students of color. Obviously I'm not. And so I think there's this, I don't know, maybe plan where you think you have to change, but I think that people can just see through that. And so just being authentic, like actually who you are, I think people respect other people that feel like they are authentic. They're coming from a place of their true self. So I leaned into that, and it was a great experience.
That's awesome. Yeah. First of all, the word that comes to mind when you were explaining that, which is actually the antonym of what you're explaining. Oftentimes I think people like consider maybe teaching or coaching as transactional and just sort of like, here you go, take this. And like you were so beyond that into a deeper level of building relationships and trust. And so first of all, that is awesome. And I love that approach, because I think that's how really teachers and coaches and anyone becomes successful, is to do it that way and build it up with your students or your players, whoever it might be, and take it, because then they learn something and they can be real with you. And then the authenticity piece, Alan knows this. This is what I speak about. I'm a speaker at schools and colleges, et cetera. And that's literally one of the themes of my talk is being yourself. And it's funny because that sounds fairly simple, to just be yourself, and it's just so not. Like it's so often people try to be someone, particularly in a leadership role, that they're not. And when you can approach it, like you mentioned, that's obviously a difficult situation to walk in, where you probably don't look like the majority of the students, and it's difficult for them to relate to you. But you're like, hey guys, this is me, and this is what I've got, and if we work together and we do this in a way that's going to build relationships, it works. And I could just tell that worked. Like I could sense that was a really good thing.
I mean, I think just on that, when you are authentic yourself or you're vulnerable yourself, even like we have a thing like name it to tame it.
Mhm.
And, if you're feeling like, oh, maybe I don't fit in or like I'm a little nervous, sometimes just calling that out, like, hey, y'all, this is my first time in a classroom. I'm nervous as
Mhm.
shit. Like,
Mhm.
so like, bear with me. I'm going to do my best. Like, it kind of just lightens the mood a little bit.
Totally.
And I do think that by you being vulnerable and by you being authentic, you just invite others to do the same. Okay, now they have permission to say how they're feeling or what they're going through. So I think that's really important. Then, to the point about building relationships, the framework of radical candor, where you care deeply about someone, but you're able to
Mhm.
give them kind of the brutal truth. You have to have a relationship with someone if you want to give them critical feedback, or they're not
Mhm.
going to take the critical feedback. And so I often think that there's this trope where, I'm just going to say whatever I want and it's on the other person to take it. Like I'm just going to give them honesty. But if you don't have a relationship, they're not going to listen to you. And so if you
Mhm.
do really think that your advice is good, it actually benefits you to form a relationship so they actually listen to you. So yeah, you have to have both. You have to form a relationship so you can have some difficult conversations.
I love it. I love it. I will say, sorry, Alan, but the last thing I want to throw out there, like the admitting to mistakes. What I found is that people don't relate to perfect. They don't, because they're not. No one is. And the more you can be vulnerable, like so, I did a keynote once, and I literally skipped over like a really significant critical part of my section. I just flipped the wrong note card over, and I was going, and 2 minutes into the next part, I was like, oh shit, like I forgot it very, and I go, guys, I just messed up, so like let's go back. And then I did the reverse from the cha-cha slide, and they all did it with me, and I went and did the thing, and it moved out, and it worked great. They were like, yeah, like, and that's, I just stopped myself. I was like, that didn't work, we got to go back and do it. And that took a long time to like train myself to get to a level of comfortability like it. But then they immediately were like zoned in, like, this guy's, I mean, I'm a professional, and I messed up. Like I
Yep.
messed up pretty significantly, but we did it together, and we went, and I made it fun, And so
Oh, yeah.
I love that approach, because it's important, and students particularly relate to that. That's what they dive into. So anyone out there who's works with students or just has an opportunity to be a resource to students, that is just so critical. That Kyle mentioned it, I echo it. Is to really, it's okay to mess up and to call it out, and to be like, you're going to do that too, so let's do this together. So that's, I really appreciate that perspective.
Of course.
Yeah. Sure. What I want to say is, when you're dealing with like first gen students, like you were,
Mhm.
you know, the idea of college possible to basically say like, look, it is viable for you to get into, higher education, and maybe they're in a situation, I think, naturally where they might feel a little hopeless. What did you see students really kind of grasping, like, yes, I can actually make it, I can make it out of wherever they are. Not saying that they were necessarily the worst place in the world, but their public schools are underfunded, and they might
Hmm.
feel forgotten in that system.
Yeah.
So, like, did you get to see students? Do you think that it kind of connected with them, and you were able to make change with them and say, college is possible?
Yeah. I think my personal opinion is like my approach probably wouldn't change based on who I'm talking to. I think part of it is just understanding like what are your actual goals? And again, going back to just getting to know someone, what do you want to accomplish for high school, for whatever is next? And I think, College Possible, the goal is to help people get into college, but I really do think it's about helping people discover what the next step might be for them. If that's college, okay, like we're going to be able to help you kind of figure out that process, which is confusing as shit, no matter who you are.
Mhm.
And if it's not, then okay, like let's lay out your options and just make sure that, whatever you want to do, we want to put you in the best position to achieve that. And I think that philosophy scales to no matter who you are. And everyone has a very different situation that's even joining College Possible as well. That the program itself is focused on the academic middle. So these were kids that weren't like top of their class, but they were solid students. And maybe that they just needed a little extra help, or they wanted a little extra help to maybe get to the best fit college. These were kids who were applying to College Possible. They got in, and so there was some, level of opt-in from them from the start. And yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, definitely. Um, moving forward just a little bit, I do still want to touch on something else that you were doing while you were in Milwaukee. You helped co-found Bridge the City, which was a podcast that was kind of aimed at, connecting people that necessarily weren't connected. And I want to tell me a little bit about how it kind of came about, and if you had any kind of success stories from that time.
Yeah, it came about because I was just a really avid listener of podcasts, and I basically was like, all right, how hard could this be? So there is a lesson in there too, where it's like sometimes naivete is a superpower.
Mhm.
Sometimes really not knowing how hard it would be, because you would have started. Like if I really knew how hard fucking podcasting was, like again, like this isn't like a war, so let's take this, in the context of the conversation. It's like actually a lot more challenging than you think if you're doing everything. Like we were doing booking the guests, recording the interview, editing the audio, publishing the audio, promoting it, everything from start to finish. And it was me and my co-founder, Ben Rangel, who is a current teacher at Cristo Rey. So shout out to Ben. And so, yeah, I think we just both love podcasts, and we were like, let's try to do one. And we also both did AmeriCorps. I met Ben at College Possible. We also both were in the Trinity Fellowship program. And so we had this shared love of Milwaukee, and we had this shared love of like trying to do something positive for the community that you're in. And it was, my sense at the time that most people felt like they could make a difference through national politics, which is definitely important. I'm not here to say it's not, but oftentimes my experience was that people would their first time ever trying to make a difference would be to engage nationally. And like they would email their senator or like call their congressperson, and you know how it is. Like you're not really going to make a difference doing that, I don't think. And so they would feel like dejected a little bit, like, oh, I tried, it didn't work, so there's nothing I can do. Where we thought, okay, a much easier avenue for your first kind of dose of civic engagement is actually locally, where the feedback loop is way tighter. The people, like just from the demand side, the mayor doesn't get as many calls as a senator and as many emails as a congressperson. So like your voice actually does matter, and you're just so close to the action. You can really see what changes need to happen and communicate that to officials. And it's easier to organize with people that are around you. So we just thought, okay, let's give people this dose of civic engagement. Let's make it really local. Let's make it really easy. And then once you build kind of confidence and competence in civic engagement, then take that confidence and maybe scale it up to the national level. You know the system a little more. You know that eventually you will break through. So that was the whole kind of point of it. And the other thing that I loved about our podcast is we ended every single episode with an action step. And this is kind of something I've carried through for my whole career, is like not just informing people about something that is going on or having a conversation, but giving them something very simple that they could do in the next 24 hours, next week, that could make a difference in their community. And we would end every episode with that ask to our guest. Like, hey, you've been around Milwaukee a lot. You're an influential figure. You've seen a lot. What's one thing that someone could do this week to make a difference in their community? And so by the end of this show, I mean, it's still running, but I'm not involved anymore. But we probably had like 200-300 great action steps that people could take to make a difference in their community.
I love that. What were some of your favorites? Like, I'm curious, like what would pop up that you remembered, like that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. I think the one that comes to mind is we interviewed a lot of the candidates for governor, including Governor Evers. So it's cool when you interview someone and they become governor. Excuse me. I think Bridge the City, really put him over the top. So he kind of owes us one for our interview there.
I love it.
We interviewed the mayor. I think we interviewed Bria Smith, who you likely, maybe but she was part of the March for Our Lives group in Milwaukee. And she was just this brilliant young woman. And I think, interacting with kids that are like 16 and just like so wise and like really fucking care, it's so inspiring. So that was great. And then I think our first episode I'll never forget, because going back to the naivete, like we were idiots. I mean, we went to interview Adam Carr, and we brought a little like microphone. I think we checked out from Marquette that I don't even remember what it's called, but it's like it sits like on a table. And then we like interviewed him at, I swear it was like 7 a.m. He was like, that's the only time available. We were like, some random place I've never been. We set this mic on the table. Cars are zooming by the window. So like every second we're talking,
Oh yeah,
And you're
The
just like, well,
worst.
the audio is gonna be fucking terrible. We were far away from the mic. So I remember editing that thing like I was like fixing, I don't know, like a movie. Like I was like, this is so bad. And also I just downloaded Audacity. I've never audio engineered in my life. So like I spent probably like 5 days on that thing. And that was tough, but it was like it was a good like lesson of like naivete is going to get you to start, and then really just like dedication and consistency is going to carry you through the rest of the way.
I love
And
it.
it was amazing to see, like, I got a job audio engineering and producing a podcast, like full-time job at Marquette, 2 years because of Bridge to City, self-taught skill that I just had to learn because no one else was going to do it. So there's definitely a lesson there too, and about how side hustles can even lead to full-time opportunities.
Oh, 100%. I do love the idea of being naive. I can't say how do you say the word? Like naivete. Naivete. I don't know why I can't say that. I'm just going to call it being naive. Because I think oftentimes when people know too much, they go into something, they're like, I can't do it. I can't do it because of all the forces. Like I pride myself on being a little blissfully ignorant about a lot of stuff where I don't know enough to not go for it. And I'm convinced that that's why I've done a few, like it's, a lot of things I do are not that easy. Like I didn't know a thing about podcasts, not that I do now, but it's like let's start this and see what happens. And actually every action item you listed out, I have Alan that does most of it. So he's, don't tell anyone I said that, but Alan's kind of the brains behind the operation. So it works out pretty well. But
shout out to Alan.
I've sent everything to AI.
Yeah,
everything's AI now. Don't worry about it. You're fine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I'm actually ChatGPT just in human form. I'm fully AI.
We were just talking about that, dude, yesterday. We were like, what if we did like a bonus episode that was just strictly from chat, whatever the hell it's called, GPT. It shows how much I go on it. But I just think it's fascinating, terrifying, and going to change the world at the same time. But moral of the story is like, if you don't put those thoughts in your head of what can fail, you typically will go after it with a clear mind. And I really like that, because I think that's kind of the way you've approached it. And it's worked out well. You learned a lot from it.
There's two great quotes. I worked with Chuck Swoboda, who is a Marquette's innovator in residence, and he hosted the Innovators on Tap podcast that I was producing. And he had this great quote that sticks with me to this day. And I absolutely love Chuck. He's been a huge influence in my life. He said, the problem with experts is they know it's not possible. And when his company was innovating on the LED light bulb, he had the world's top physicist basically saying that the technology that you need to develop to make this a commercially viable product is impossible. And like it kind of was, like, they were experts and they had been studying this forever. And like, so you kind of build a box when you're an expert, and you get kind of trapped in the best practices. And sometimes it does take a naive, fresh set of eyes to be like, well, what if we just did this thing that the experts have often overlooked? And then, when Steve Jobs was fired from Apple the first time, he said it was the best thing that ever happened to him upon reflection, because he had the opportunity to become a beginner again. And there's just something so powerful about coming to a problem with a fresh perspective, with beginner's eyes. And I do think that the people that most evolve in their career and stay fresh and stay relevant always view the world like semi as a beginner. There's always something to learn. There's always something I'm missing. Nothing is impossible. And it's those people that ultimately have great careers and transform the world.
Yep. No, without a doubt. I think that's spot on. I mean, because having that mindset makes a difference. And if you psych yourself out before you start something, it's probably not going to happen. And I think it's really important. So I'm curious, like your work, obviously, going into Marquette and graduate school and begin kind of working with the 707 hub, and probably in the relatively early days, I think. I'm not sure how long it's been open.
Yeah, I think it was pretty early.
Yeah, like what was that like? I know you probably got to meet a lot of people. Obviously, Chuck, who's a friend of mine too, great guy. And what was there's people you got introduced to, some of the experiences you had. What did some of that teach you? And for those, obviously, I think everyone pretty much knows what 707 Hub is now. But innovation and really entrepreneurs coming together to share ideas and get better as a result is the best way I could describe it from what I've seen.
Yeah, in some ways, I would say that college or graduate school or wherever is probably the best time in your life to do as many random things as possible.
Oh yeah.
I would almost say like I did enough to like pass classes, and like people are always like, but don't take my advice. No, I literally think like people care too much about classes. And you're on a campus where like your at marquette.edu Gmail or like email is like the key to the city.
Yeah.
Because so many people will just help out students. Oh, it's a student project? Sure. Let's do it. And like if you're in a privileged position where like maybe like your parents are paying for school, or like you're in a dorm room and like you're not paying rent, then like you have 4 years where like life isn't real. Like you're so lucky if you're in that position. Life is not real. You have basically unlimited bandwidth and a key to the city or to the world to do whatever you want. And even if it fails, no one expects it to be good. You're like a dumbass. Sorry, I don't know if I swear, but
You
like
can say what, yeah, you're good.
You're like
a
dumbass, like sophomore. Like no one's like, oh, this isn't perfect. So the bar is so low, the opportunity is so high, and you're kind of on borrowed time. And so for 4 years, I would literally start a podcast. I would write. I would do whatever wild dreams you have, because one of them might take off. But if they don't, by the time you graduate, you're going to be like 5 years ahead of your peers, because you ran 6 or 7 different businesses. You've had all these different experiences. And that's, to me, way more valuable than, maybe getting a A instead of a B or something like that. So the 707 Hub is great. But I think all of Marquette's great. All colleges are great. It's literally a bunch of people who wake up every day and in their best mood is like, how do I help people achieve what they want to achieve? You're surrounded by people that are going to help you. Professors are hella connected. The businesses love you. Like literally take full advantage of that. Cause it's a rare time in your life. Once you graduate, people are like, now you're an adult. I don't want to help you. Like, that's going to cost money.
It's so true. Exactly. It's so true.
I learned so much. I think, I mean, okay, I don't remember a ton from classes. I will say that. I learned so much though from like doing projects and going out into the city, because we were shooting a lot of videos, and like that experience of getting out and having, like you said, access because you're a student is key, because now all of a sudden, you're renting, like for us, we were making videos and making stuff. We're renting cameras that we would never be able to afford. We're working with people and getting access to people to interview them and whatever, because they know it's going to be just some student thing. It's probably not going to air anywhere. It's going to hurt them, so like you learn literally on the job sort of, but it was all about getting out and getting out of the classroom for me too. So
100%. Yeah.
I mean, taking Bridge to City, like it's about so much more than podcasting. If you really break down what you have to do as just like a 2-person team, we filed an LLC. We had to make a bank account. We had to schedule our own guests. You had to have good communication skills. You had to know how to find people's email. You had to like send them emails that didn't make them go, who the hell is this? Then you have to like show up on time. You have to get all the equipment. You have to organize everything. You have to edit it. You have to publish it. We built a website. Like when you really break it down, you're learning all of these really important skills from the ground up yourself. So you walk out, again, even if the business, so to speak, is a failure, you're coming out armed with a plethora of skills, which is pretty dope.
Yeah,
I love it. It's a training ground to fail, because if you do, then I mean, nobody really you can brush that off as I was a student.
Yeah. It's house money. I mean, it's really like house money. You just go and you try. I mean, and not to mention, you get a meal plan and people make food for you. That was definitely my favorite part. But I would get a meal plan at this moment right now if I loved it.
Whoever's working on adult meal plans, you hit us up. You got 3 investors right
there. We go.
Sign us up. I'm like 100% serious too, which is actually kind of sad. But
that's
here
the
we
new side hustle. Is we're gonna start an adult meal plan.
I
love how to give each other swipes, like an app where you can send each other swipes.
Be awesome. I would go to Kobe and get chicken nuggets like at this moment for sure. It'd be great.
We might have just invented something. We maybe don't. No. So Kyle, let's talk about like what brings you out to New York then, and what ultimately gets you to Morning Brew. Tell us about that journey, and what made you make the leap.
Yeah, so I'll maybe back up to I graduate from Marquette. And just again, talking about the power of side hustles, one of the benefits too is like you're just kind of putting your name out there. You're increasing the surface area of luck. And so I got an email one day from Chuck. I did not know this guy. I get an email from Chuck Sabote. He's like, hey, I was talking to someone at Marquette. I'm thinking about launching a podcast. They know you and they know you know how to do everything about a podcast. If you want to talk, by the way, I was the public company CEO of a $1 billion company for 16 years. And I was like, yeah, I saw $1 billion. I was like, you name the coffee place, Chuck, I'm going to be there. So I met up with Chuck, and that led to a full-time job. So like just once you start doing, you never know where that is going to lead. So that was great. I worked with Chuck for 2 years. We did podcasts, we did events, we worked with students at Marquette. And so I learned a lot from him, like so much. And we interviewed a lot of great entrepreneurs and leaders. And yeah, and then at that time, I think I just, I never saw myself working for a university. And you know, there's no knock in universities, but I think it's about fit. And I was a much more like, I need something like scrappy and like startup-y. And I think you know, big bureaucracies are probably the opposite of that. So I applied to a job at Morning Brew. And this again was another job. It was at that time basically community manager. I never had a job that had community in the title, but I was able to tell a career narrative in which community was very important to me, and it is. I mean, I had to build a community at AmeriCorps. I was part of the Trinity Fellows community and saw the power of that. When we were doing Bridge the City, it was all about bridging people together and creating community in Milwaukee. And so the other benefit of doing a lot of side hustles is they're very convenient when you have to interview for a full-time role, because they allow you to craft a career narrative that's very, very effective, because you actually can speak to a lot of things. And it's kind of proof that you're a self-starter. One of my favorite interview questions is like, tell me something that you did that no one told you to do.
Yeah.
And like, if they're like, oh yeah, I have like this really cool side hustle. No one told me to do it. I figured this out. I figured that out. Okay. I know that if I just throw this problem at this person, they're going to figure it out. They don't need a roadmap. They're able to create their own. So it's one of the best things you can do for so many different reasons. And I think that's partly why Morning Brew took a shot on me. And I feel really grateful to the company as well for that.
Yeah. I got my job partially because of my side hustle too. So
yeah. I would say that my side hustle has added a ton of value that I wouldn't have had to my. I didn't get it because of it, but what I've been able to do, and you know, and Kyle, to your point, like the greatest interview answers ever when you're, you know, talking about like name a situation where you're like, you know, be flexible. Like literally every talk I've ever given when they don't give me enough time, you know, like I had a fire drill go on when I started a keynote 2 weeks ago, and I like made it work. Like it's just you just learn stuff, and it's so fun and it's scary, but it gives you perspective that you realize that you would have a leg up. But yeah, there's a level of how much transferability, you know, from one thing to the next, and you do form your own narrative. I love that, because I think, you know, you are your brand, right? And if you can form the sort of story behind that, not everyone can do that. They're kind of like, well, I think I'm into marketing, I'm really into sales, you know, like they're really just sort of broadleaf type of things. But if you can come down and be like, here's what I've done, here's why community is really important to me, and here's how it's going to impact this role, like that's the job, like game on. You know, and it worked out. And I think it's cool you found a place that really is suitable for some of those needs and your kind of your next steps. And it feels like it's been a really good fit. But I think that's like that level of having so many experiences to come in and be like, yeah, I have an answer for everything you're about to ask me. Like, let's do this.
and to provide like a counterpoint, because I think maybe someone's listening to this and they're like a PhD physicist and they're like, hey, Kyle, your podcast is cool and all, but like I'm trying to like split the atom, and so I need to focus and I need to be locked into that like every single day. So I totally understand that. There's a great book called Range by David Epstein, and it's like the tagline's like how generalists will triumph in a world full of specialists. But I think that's kind of a caricature of his argument. But what I would say to someone that, you know, maybe doesn't buy into the side hustle thing is, I think we have this belief that in order to get great at X, all you should do is X. It's like the 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell rule. But I think a lot of the research that I'm privy to and that is in the book, it's not about not becoming great at one thing. It's just the idea that if you want to become great at X, you still need to do X, but by doing a little bit of Y and a little bit of Z, it makes you better at X. And so the physicist that's like a killer physicist, but also has done this like interesting side project, the number of times I hear people say, my biggest breakthrough was applying an analogy across domains. I had this side hustle, but I had a main thing. A thing I learned in the side hustle, holy shit, what if I did that over here? And that is how you end up doing breakthroughs. The most creative breakthroughs often come from people that like are applying something and they learn somewhere else to it. And so I think even if you're a little skeptical of this idea of a side hustle, I think just like looking at that research and understanding that like you still need to be great, you still need to do one thing a lot, but doing some other things will make you better at that main thing than just doing it alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's going back to the idea of coming with whatever your project is with a fresh perspective. So let's say I had like a long day, work, whatever, and I go and do my side hustle. The next day I'm feeling energized, and I go back and I see this in a whole different light. That happens a
Yeah.
lot. Like, I mean, and like a real lot. And it's important. It's actually it's really therapeutic, frankly, is to go and do that and do something I really have a passion for. And then I love what I do too on both sides. But I can come back and both areas serve a different part for me, and
Yep.
it's important. So like doing it has to be something you really like a lot, like if you're going to commit time to it, and then you get a brain break. You sort of get to focus on something else, and then you rejuvenate a little bit, get some rest, and then you dive into whatever that problem was, and you may be seeing it in a whole different light that will then help. But it does, it really, the why can really go into the X if you allow it to, right? And let that carry over.
I'm kind of the same way where basically breaking and entering is my training ground. It's my guinea pig for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
If I think it's going to work here, it's going to work, at my main job at the Shepherd Express. So I get to test stuff. I get to try and, that is kind of your safety net too, is the side hustle. Cause if it doesn't work, it's only you that sees it or whatever, but let's talk about kind of what you're doing now too, in addition to Morning Brew. Let us know, do you have any kind of side hustles or side projects that you still work on while you're out there?
Yeah. So I started a side hustle with my friend Rachel Cantor, who used to work at Morning Brew, now works at a D2C startup data firm. I'm probably butchering what they actually do, but it's called Tida. And we called it oddly specific. So me and Rachel had a similar story, both Midwest people. We moved to New York. When I moved to New York, I didn't know basically anyone. If I count like some colleagues who I knew remotely, maybe a few, but I had no friends. And I didn't really know anyone like from a previous life that had moved to New York that I could even like reconnect with. So I didn't know anyone. And Rachel also was in a pretty similar spot where she moved to New York and she didn't know anyone. And we probably all had a similar experience at some place, whether it's a city, a job. You go into an area, you don't know anyone, it can feel very uncomfortable and you lose a lot of confidence. And so what do you do when you move to New York? Everyone invites you to a happy hour on a rooftop. And the first time you go, you're like, this is the coolest city ever. I'm on a rooftop, I'm drinking beers, I'm meeting new people. And then the second time you go, you still kind of think that because it is pretty cool. But then like 10 times, you're like, I cannot do another one of these again.
This road stinks.
Yeah. And so we had this like theory that when people meet in interesting ways, or when people meet in oddly specific ways, it forms this like story that then you're much more likely to stay friends. Like, oh, I met him at a happy hour rooftop. You're like, I meet tons of people. It's not cool. But did you meet them like doing something crazy, like windsurfing? It's like, okay, yeah, I'm probably gonna be friends with them. So we had this first event called Stoop and Sip, where we found 13 stoops across New York. And I thought everyone knew what a stoop was, but in case you don't, it's like stairs that go up and just like in the front of your house. Yeah. And so we found 13 stoops, and people signed up, and then we assigned them to a random stoop in New York City with like 5 other people that were random as well. And then we brought or had a carrier bring like drinks and snacks to the stoop. And so you went to a random fucking stoop in New York. You met 5 people. There's some beer or non-alcoholic drinks and some chips. I think this is illegal. So if Eric Adams is listening, I didn't do it. And people like loved it. I've still heard people saying, oh, am still friends with them, or we went on a trip together, or we play tennis together, because you just met in this really interesting way that you can always like, even if things get a little weird, you can just be like, this is weird, we're on a stoop. So it kind of gave you an out. And then we did another event called Play Date, where we basically took like fun 5th grade class activities like guess the musician or playing with Play-Doh. And we had like cute little cereal out, and you went around in groups to like play random, almost like 5th grade games as adults. And we were like inside this large baby store. It was weird. And so, yeah, it was oddly specific. And so we've done a few things like that, and we're still planning on doing more. But I think also it's a great lesson for people if you're ever moving to a new city, just trying to meet people in ways that aren't like centered around just rooftop drinking or bars is a lot easier. Like join a rec league, like join a book club. I found that to be much more successful in meeting people. And I'm really glad I took that route, because it's tough being lonely, as everyone knows.
Yeah, that's great.
I want to steal this and bring this to Milwaukee now.
Dude, you can have it. I'll license it for free. You
That's
rock
awesome.
and roll.
That's right.
So cool. That's an amazing idea. And you're right. A better way to connect with people than just, hey, I saw you at this bar, because I've met a million people in bars.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, or I've met a million people at networking events or whatever the hell, you know.
Mhm.
I have not sat on a stoop. I've been assigned to go chill on a stoop with somebody, and I like that. So
Yeah,
you
that's
didn't know what stoop was? Did you not watch Hey Arnold as a kid?
Thank you. That I want to
Stoop
shout
kids
out
afraid to
Alan
leave his stoop.
because we had our invite. There's a picture of Hey Arnold, and I think it
There
was
you go.
Stoop Kids Afraid to Leave the Stoop. So
Yeah.
that's a great reference. Shout out to my '90s kids everywhere. Hey Arnold.
We're here.
Um,
We're here to party. I love it. Yeah, that's great. Same with like the shout out to rec leagues. I've been playing rec league volleyball for 15 years now, and I've met so many good people under the pretense of just we enjoy playing volleyball. And I'm actually going to a game in about a half hour after this with some folks
hell
who I just got to meet too. It's great, and like you do it, and you know, just like it's not always under the influence of having 9 beers. You know, like this, it's more fun to just like. And granted, we do have beers when we're playing, but it's a very different world. So
in
that's
moderation.
awesome. That's right. That's right.
So very quickly then, how did obviously it sounds like it was a good response to the first event. How did you kind of get those initial people signed up and involved? And what was the initial reactions when you told them, like, for that first event, like, hey, you're gonna go chill on a stoop?
I think the other thing, I'll answer this in reverse. The initial reactions are sometimes friction is good. And I think everyone will go to a bar. So everyone goes to a bar. You don't really know who you're like. It's a really wide range. I think the best networking events are the best way to meet people, introduce friction. So you're finding people that have a same personality, same interest. Rec league, that's a filter. If you don't like volleyball, you're not signing up for a volleyball team. So if you do something a little out there, do you want to meet a random person on a stoop? No one that doesn't want to meet a random person on a stoop is going to sign up. So the only people that sign up are the people that want to meet random people on stoops. And there you go. You put them together and you're golden. So I do think that sometimes the error in like throwing events is people are like, we want everyone to come. And we like, it's just we're going to serve water. Everyone likes water. And it's like, yeah, but then everyone is there and it's hard to meet people that have any shared interest. So sometimes you want it to like classify, not classify, but like people to qualify. Friction can be really good. That's like an event tip or a community tip I've found. So yeah, that one went quite well. The other thing I'll say is, like, when I moved to New York, I was on Twitter, mainly because I thought Morning Brew wouldn't hire me if I didn't have a Twitter account, because they're a digital media company. So I literally went on Twitter, and anyone that had New York as their location, I DM'd, and I was like, hey, my name's Kyle. I work for Morning Brew. Morning Brew has like a good brand rep. So in New York, it's a bunch of hustlers. So they'll meet with anyone that's like, they think might be cool, or like, oh, you work for Morning Brew. And I was like, joke's on you, I'm the lamest person there. But I DM'd everyone and was just like, do you want to grab coffee? And I probably met 50 people in my first 50 days. Yeah. And so like, I also just met a lot of people through, I drink an insane amount of caffeine. You can't tell, but so that also was an effective strategy. It's just like putting yourself out there. Someone says no, someone says no. But it also helps you formulate like cold emails and cold DMs. Like, it's kind of an art as well that's going to benefit you for a long time.
Love it. Slide in the DMs with some Morning Brew and good things will happen. I appreciate that.
Okay. And then, so where do you want to take this, take Oddly Specific, or take, your role at Morning Brew? Like, where do you see, not to be like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see,
I love it. Lay it on me.
Where do you see your hustle in the near future?
Sounds like, Kyle, tell me your deepest, darkest secret.
Tell us everything.
What's your parents' relationship like? No. For more, I think, again, the beauty about side hustles is like, there's no pressure. You can turn them on, you can turn them off. And I'll be honest, this whole thing was about side hustles, but I think I'm in like side hustle mode off right now. My role at Morning Brew is just this perfect blend of so many different things I'm interested in, that it kind of feels like I don't necessarily need to attach a side hustle to it. Like, it feels like it's like 7 side hustles combined in one. And I think the company has been really generous about like being able to scale your career and build your career in a way that really excites you. And the role is just so expansive that I get to do a lot of really things that fill me up. And so I think I have great like work-life harmony. So honestly, my future plans are like to continue to do the best job I possibly can at this company, and see where that takes me. So I'll be honest. I know we're on hustling sideways, but I'm in side hustle mode off right now.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, you're allowed to have that. That's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got. Everyone's got to have their moment. I also like that you use the word harmony for work life, because I think now that we're all so connected and literally have computers in our hands, the balance is not, it's like you got to harmonize them, and if they're in harmony and you feel comfortable with the amount of time you have them both, that's good. I don't see, like I'm on a lot, and I'm not going to pretend like I have a balance. I have a harmony. I'm comfortable with what I've got. I can shut down when I want to, but I can also respond at 9 if I want to. Like that's like if I'm feeling like I'm, like let's do this. So it's good, and I think you've really found that nice, that harmony together, because that's difficult. Not everyone's able to do that, and that's when burnout happens. So that's acknowledging that.
It's very true, and I think it's good advice for any like younger people listening. Is like, oftentimes, I mean, this is how like culture works: is you accept a default, and sometimes those defaults are great for you, and sometimes they're not. But oftentimes you don't actually examine like, what is the default I'm operating in, and I think there's a narrative that's like, work shouldn't be X. And I just feel like anything that's like 100% like declarative is probably wrong. Yeah. And so I would just encourage you, like, what do you want? What role do you want work to play in your life? If you do want something that's 9 to 5 because you want to do X, Y, or Z after, that's fucking awesome. If you want something that you wake up at 7 and you don't go to bed until midnight and the whole time you're working on it, that's also great. And so find what you like and find other people that want that same thing and do that. I get kind of like frustrated when people are very prescriptive, like work has to be 9 to 5 or work has to be 7 a.m. to midnight. It doesn't. And find your own thing and don't just accept the default. And I think you'll be way happier.
Yeah.
100%. Yep.
That is a great one to land on. Is find your harmony, find your thing that's gonna, what works for you. Yes, I love that. So we mentioned that you have a Twitter account because we know that now. how you're able to work at Morning Brew.
Yes.
People do want to get in touch with you and learn maybe a little more about either Oddly Specific or what you do, or any of the various things that you've kind of done in your path to get to, where you're at. Where's a good place to go and connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I've heard that's the boomer platform. I'm there at Kyle Hagge, Hagge. I'm on Twitter at Kyle Hagge. I'm on my mom's fridge, a picture of me in 5th grade because she loves me. Shout out to my mom and my dad. And then my email is kyle.d.hagge@gmail.com. So Twitter, LinkedIn, or email. Hit me up if you have any questions or want to chat, and I'm happy to do it.
There we go. Perfect. Well, if you are listening to this show or watching for the first time, thank you. If you were watching for your 59th time, thank you.
Also, thank you.
If you're watching for your 70th time, you're lying. There hasn't been that many episodes.
That is a bold-faced lie. Yeah. Correct. Yep. Thank you for that.
So if you want to find this show, you can do that over by we are everywhere that you get your podcasts. So, make sure you subscribe and do the whole thing there. You got to give us 5 stars. Jim, I don't think we've said that in a while.
That's a rule. Yep. 5 is a rule. Correct. We don't make the rules
legally,
here. It's just, we just pronounce them.
Legally, the minimum is 5 stars.
My friend gave a 4-star review and I haven't seen him since.
Yeah, that's it. That's an easy way to be excommunicated. I would agree. Yep.
Things happen. All right. People disappear. Anyway, you can also find us. We are everywhere. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube as Hustling Sideways as well. If you want to be a guest on the show too, we got a Gmail too. So you can hit us up. It's hustlingsideways@gmail.com. And thank you guys so much for listening. And Jim,
keep on hustling.